Hopefully, the battle over who gets these shots could ease up thanks to increased supply now that distribution of the recently approved Johnson & Johnson vaccine has begun in this country. Unlike Moderna and Pfizer's vaccine, J&J's doesn't require intense refrigeration, and you only need one dose of it. I spoke late last week with Dr. Tony Mills, CEO of the Men's Healthcare Foundation, and asked him if this could be a real game changer when it comes to this pandemic.
I think game changer is exactly the right word, Alex, to use. We've been using that as investigators through the whole time of the trial. The fact that it's one dose is amazing. It's very difficult to get people back for their second dose. The timing is different between Moderna and Pfizer. There's a lot of confusion. People get upset. So the fact that we can actually secure in one dose that someone has protection is amazing. Some people, it's very difficult for them to get to the site. I mean, people who live in rural areas, or lack transportation. So one dose makes a huge difference.
Right.
It's a very safe vaccine. It's incredibly well tolerated. We saw very few side effects in the study, and it's a very effective vaccine. One of the differences, a lot of people look at that, 77% in the Johnson & Johnson trial and the 95% in the Pfizer and Moderna trial. But, one of the first things we're taught on the first day of medical school is you can't compare between studies because inevitably the groups are different. So Pfizer and Moderna were done earlier in the course of the epidemic. The epidemic wasn't as severe. We didn't have the presence of variants. And many companies try to find the healthiest people to participate in their trials. Obviously, you don't want someone to have a heart attack in your trial, or you don't want a woman to have a miscarriage. So what Johnson & Johnson did, and I really commend them on that, I was so proud to be a part of their trial, they didn't do that. They reached out and they said, bring us your sickest patients, bring us the people at most risk for COVID, bring us your Black and brown communities, bring us your obese patients, your hypertensive patients, your diabetic patients, your patients living with HIV, bring us your elderly patients. In fact, they stopped enrolling several times during the course of the trial, telling people, you have to bring us these sick patients. Stop bringing us healthy patients. And so that number, that 77% number, reflects a completely different world that vaccine was being evaluated in. And so I'm incredibly excited about it, and I think all of us in the field are.
And Dr. Mills, I'd love to ask you a little bit more about the testing that has been done right here. And of course, Johnson & Johnson's been testing all over the world, but here in Southern California, as I understand it, this is happening at what used to be a hair salon on Sunset Boulevard. And as you mentioned, it's extraordinary. It's a really interesting story. And the fact that you are specifically, that you have been recruiting people who are most in need and who have been most hard hit by this pandemic. And you mentioned Black and brown communities. Can you talk to me, because we've talked a lot on this program about how difficult it has been to try to convince those who have very well-founded hesitancy about vaccines, given the way, especially the Black community, you look at the historical precedents here for experimentation. I think that anxiety is well understood. I can't even imagine what it would be like for a vaccine that hadn't been cleared yet. So how'd you do it?
Well, we really targeted two things. Number one, we wanted our vaccine sites to be right in the middle of the neighborhoods of the patients that we wanted to take care of. We wanted people to be able to walk to these sites. And so we have a location on Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood, half a block from the West Hollywood City Hall. And that was really meant to especially target people living with HIV and the West Hollywood group that we felt were at higher risk. The second site that we set up was down in Inglewood. And obviously, as you said, Black and brown individuals have been disproportionately not included in either the trials or the vaccine rollout. And so we wanted to, again, be in people's neighborhoods. Maybe they're walking by on the way to the grocery store. They see something that intrigues them. They stop by and talk to some of our staff. We've tried to employ staff that look like the people that we're hoping to get into the trial. So we have an amazing African-American woman who's our CMO, Tracy Robinson. She's been very vested in the South LA effort. We have a group of individuals who've worked with us for years who are really focused on racial disparity, and so they've been fully committed to the trial. It's not that communities are impossible to connect with, it's that you have to know how to connect with them. And you have to have social humility about that. And you have to reach out and do everything you can to connect with those communities. And then they'll trust you, and then they'll listen to you about your recommendations.
Dr. Mills, you have a lot of experience when it comes to HIV, for which there still remains no vaccine, but there are a lot of similarities when you look at the trajectory of HIV and what we have seen with COVID. And based on your experience, look, we are still by no means, out of the worst of it when it comes to COVID, but it does feel to me, especially with this Johnson & Johnson vaccine coming along, we are turning a corner of such. What from the American experience and the Southern California experience with HIV do you feel like is most important to think about doing as we move into this new phase with COVID-19?
I was doing my residency in San Francisco in the early 80s when the HIV epidemic was just breaking. And I was planning on being a cardiologist. And then I found myself in San Francisco in 1985, and I realized there was something much more important in our field than cardiology. And so I switched my efforts and really immersed myself in the HIV arena. And it was interesting, it was a very similar pandemic that we dealt with. We had many people who worked for us who had worked through the HIV pandemic, and when COVID arrived, they said, I'm out. I went through one of these. This is too much for me. I just can't do it again. And I understood that. I mean, we had all lost so many people to HIV, and then we started losing people to COVID, and it was very, very fearful. So I understood that. I think the things that we learned from the HIV epidemic is don't give up. There were many times where we wanted to give up, and we wanted something fast, a cure, and we realized that wasn't happening. But then we evolved to a world where, HIV patients are really well taken care of now, and they lead really a very normal life. And I think that, all of us feel trapped in this COVID bubble. We all clamor for some degree of normalcy. When can I hug my mother again? When can I hug my kids? When can I go to the grocery store and breathe? So I think that those things are all coming. Just like in the HIV epidemic, we didn't believe it, but it evolved, and now it's going to evolve in the COVID crisis. And it's evolving much quicker now. We learned so much from the HIV epidemic. So I caution people just to be patient and know that, the people who are bright-minded and innovative are working on it. We're going to see a better world, I promise.
Yeah. And in terms of what this breakthrough with Johnson & Johnson could mean for our supply, because especially here in Southern California, we may well get to that point where supply outweighs demand. Feels like that's really far away. Can you give us just a rough sense of what this could mean in terms of the supply potential here?
Again, Alex, it could be just a game changer. Johnson & Johnson is an amazing company. They have a beautiful Johnson & Johnson credo that says they're not working at the behest of their shareholders. They're working for the good of the people they take care of. They know how important this is. They've been making vaccine and storing it in a warehouse for months now. They have 2 warehouses, I've been told, one with 3 million vaccines, one with 9 million vaccines.
Dr. Tony Mills, CEO of the Men's Health Foundation, thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing on this very important front, and thank you for making the time to chat with us.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate being here.